Namaste, Jai Bharat. As the things are, as the situation is with us, terrorist activities in Bharat is not going to end all on a sudden just like that. We have to endure the terrorism in our nation for quite some time, maybe from generations to generations. It is a fact until this is globally destroyed, where other nations who are only taking lessons slowly have to get matured into their understanding and react. That shall happen eventually, which is very clear. But then, so long as this continues, we also have to be engaged in counter-terrorist activities for quite some long time. From the Delhi blasts, what reveals is that people who are otherwise educated, informed, are completely involved, and they turn as jihadis with the utter belief that this life in the world, earth, is useless and meaningless, and the real life shall be after death. So they don't mind to sacrifice themselves. They don't care about death because they're so sure, they're so positive, they're sure that they will continue living a much better life once they engage themselves in jihad and sacrifice themselves for their beliefs. This had gone into so-called educated people. Now we have medical doctors. Medical doctors are more convenient because they have some training in chemistry, physics, and can be further trained upon the already acquired knowledge or training which they have. So they can be channeled into any area of construction for destruction. Now I am thinking about something else. We have a lot of funding agencies in our nation. We have a lot of funding agencies which funds academic activities. Academic activities such as projects, seminars, symposiums, workshops, etc., etc., etc. Now they send people concerned or societies concerned shall send proposals for various academic activities, and the funds are sanctioned. The agencies who are funding would have to understand, go through the proposals, and then eventually decide either to reject or accept, etc. One has to be very serious in this aspect, because there are many proposals which are implicitly supporting separatism. There are very mild, beautiful separatisms which appears very innocent. Not necessarily they could lead to terrorism, but this can promote terrorism through intense separatist tendencies and thinking where applicable. For instance, take the example, I'm just giving an example of so-called north-south divide. There may be someone who would like to speak of the distinctiveness of a region in Bharat, for example South, and the specialities and contributions of South. These are there. No one is rejecting it and then saying that they are slightly different from the rest of Bharat, and here begins the separated tendencies very mildly, very secretly, very calculatively, very callously. Is slightly different, and this difference could be magnified through further talks, discussions on the platform or in the house into the real separatism. And these separatisms could be extended into, any kind of terrorism. Any separatist activities could lead to terrorism. One example of South. Another is Northeast. Somebody could make a discussion group or do a project, etc., on the identity crisis of multiple tribes. Just mention about the identity crisis, without mentioning the coexistence of the multiplicity, multiples and plural. Once you completely ignore the coexistence, which is the case, that coexistence is real, there are variations which are not differences, and people do coexist naturally. But where the variations are picked up and projected as difference could lead to separatism. Then another thing which is very innocent, there are many feminist schools and feministic thinking and feminist theories. But if you fundamentally see, these feminist theories are not Bharatiya thoughts. They have nothing to do with our knowledge tradition, Veda Upanishadic knowledge tradition, Bharatiya Sanskriti, etc. The imposition or the perception that woman is different from man comes to Bharat through the Mughals. Veil, parda, this and that thing. Our Pallu is a resultant of that practice which still goes on. If you go to the roots of Bharatiya knowledge tradition, we had Rishikas and Rishis. I need not to say anything more how women are treated. And let's not just forget that Bharata has given the concept of Ardha Narishwar. Prakriti, Purusha, Shiva, Shakti, all those things. So women or women are not treated as the other. That is Sarthian philosophy. The other. When you treat someone or something as the other, then the contradiction develops. If you look for the roots of the feminism, which is relevant in many of European societies, because they had such tradition, which is irrelevant in Bharatiya society. It is possible that in our nation this kind of thoughts could be introduced with vivacity and strength and could create a difference which would slowly take one to separatism, and separatism can be twisted into any branch of one desires. In separatism, that's terrorism, it comes. It can, at least. For European society, the feminist movements are a natural result of the suppressions which they are undergone, which has its roots in Plato itself. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, there were three greatest minds in the past. And Plato, I don't know to what extent he is serious about the distinction he made. He has a ladder of beings where begins top is idea of good, then demiurge, then gods and goddesses, then heroes, then man, then women and animals. You look at that distinction, and from here, that woman is inferior is a thought. Maybe Plato has just produced the Greek situation of women those days, where women did not have the voting rights in Greek democracy. Women and slaves. Slaves are those the captives from war. So they don't have voting rights, obviously. And women in the society also did not have voting rights. So women were treated as inferior. And from this, with the development of Christianity and papacy, the society becomes man-centric, male dominant, patriarchal mostly, and women suffered. Women were treated as inferior, and this continued. You know the story of Joan of Arc, and you know the stories, many such incidents from history, in the past. So this gave a situation where the average European women, they had to speak for themselves against the establishment. So this becomes the root edifice of feminism, women's right organizations. Now, because of the infatuation towards what is in Europe, many of our people become feminists and feminist supporters who do a lot of work in feminist theories, and this could be used as difference creating mechanism which could lead to separatism. So the point is, our funding agencies, when fund, should be very careful about any tendency towards differences. Variations acceptable. Because when you say variation, it is a variation based on some oneness. But when you talk about differences, it is entirely different, which can lead to contradiction and conflict. So funding agencies innocently fund, and many cases most likely the whole process remains innocent. But then it has this possible strength of implication. Why I say this is that for the time to come in future, Bharat has to continuously face separatism, then terrorism from that, and we have to continuously fight. Now, our own funding agencies, in either ignorance or in the attempt to become broad liberal, etc., try to fund any academic exercise, which can create differences among our society. Variations acceptable, but variations should be accepted as variations and not differences. It should be discontinued with. It should be not promoted. People may be very critical about such people who are involved in doing what I say, but then that criticism you take, people may personally abuse you for being whatever autocratic or this thing or that thing, that you are not funding someone whom I suggested because this thing, that thing, or this could be possible, but one has to take it in national interest. This is something people, those who understand, should understand. We shall meet again. Namaste. Jai Bharat. Jai Sri Ram.